Through the chair, the meeting is now live.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Hope everyone had a good weekend. We have 4 items in committee today. They're all, I think they're all quite positive, good items we need to dealing with. So with that out of the way, we'll get right underway with the Digital Kitchener and Innovation Lab update, and there will be a presentation from staff on this. So I'm not sure who's taking it over, but I do see Mr. Murray's here.
Yep. Just have the presentation up. Perfect. Good morning, Chair Davey and members of Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Very pleased to be here today to provide an update on Digital Kitchener, as well as the work of our Digital Kitchener Innovation Lab. The committee report included a link to a Digital Kitchener update video. I was going to play it this morning, but I'm going to use my time to speak to the efforts of our staff more than the video. That video was created to provide a Digital Kitchener update to the community. Most of that video's content had been finalized prior to the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As proud as I was of the progress we'd made up to that point, the effort and outcomes that have come since we responded to the new challenges driven by the pandemic have been nothing less than outstanding. I'll just ask that we move towards slide 4, please. Perfect. Just back one. Thank you. Our technology environment was in an excellent position to respond to the immediate needs of the pandemic. We had completed our pilot for Office 365 and the software environment was ready. Council had approved the budget requirements a few months prior to the pandemic. And although our well thought out project plans were tossed in the trash, TIS staff did what they did do so well, responded to the change and pivoted to the new needs. We deployed Microsoft Teams to all staff across the organization immediately, and Office 365 was deployed to all staff shortly after. Hundreds of new and used laptops were deployed to staff who were suddenly required to work from their home. We increased VPN and internet capacity, procured the licenses needed to move to a remote work environment. New technologies introduced into an organization typically follow an adoption curve that can take several years to see the majority of staff leveraging the benefits from that technology. With our Office 365 deployment, we crushed that technology adoption curve and began to immediately see staff leveraging value from the investment. Over a recent 3-month period, Microsoft Teams facilitated over 30,000 hours of video collaboration among staff and enabled more than 12,300 meetings. That's over a 3-month period. Our adoption of connected cloud infrastructure has allowed us to rapidly pivot to operating remotely while continuing to deliver great service and effective government. We were one of the first municipalities to hold virtual council meetings, take programs and events online, and continue collaboration and engagement through a variety of virtual channels such as Engage and Mural. Next slide, please. The pandemic also created opportunity to advance the on-demand and inclusive pillars of Digital Kitchener. Many city services were moved online during the pandemic using digital forms and bookings tools, online payments, online tax certificates fulfillment, and tax deferral requests early in the pandemic. The new My Kitchener website was launched during the pandemic, seeing high levels of adoption and receiving very positive feedback from the community. New online tools such as the Make Tracks Challenge were created to help members of the community find interesting and safe physical activities to do during the pandemic. In order to ensure that members of the community have access to these digital services, we expanded services to support digital inclusion. Additional free Wi-Fi was added to a number of outdoor locations. The downtown area received enhanced Wi-Fi at City Hall, the Kitchener Market, along King Street, Gowdy's Lane, and at the new Vogelsang Green. Outdoor Wi-Fi access points were also added to 2 community centers, and the success of that initiative led to outdoor Wi-Fi being installed at other community centers. Programs such as Kitchener Tech Connects supported older adults with access to devices and training on how to use them. City staff even ran cybersecurity awareness training sessions to help keep these people safe using these online tools that they'd never used before. Next slide, please. Even though we've been busy supporting the rapid digital transformation of services across the organization throughout the pandemic, our pace for innovation has not slowed down. The Digital Kitchener Innovation Lab has continued to engage city staff and the tech community on new opportunities for design thinking, rapid prototyping, and new technology explorations. The lab has supported several projects over the course of the past year. Leveraging the work done with 3D modeling, the lab has 3D printed key development areas of the city, including downtown. This 3D model, along with augmented reality applications, supports engagement in planning projects by visualizing future possibilities. Over the summer, the lab supported the use of an e-trike and a 360-degree camera to capture Google Street View imagery of city parks and trails. The Street View imagery is available to the public to help them explore trails before heading out, and will be used to help plan maintenance tasks and assess the accessibility of trails and park features. The lab has also been supporting air quality monitoring in a partnership with Hemera and Wilfrid Laurier University, and capturing street traffic patterns using new technology. Exploration with how the city can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to perform laborious tasks such as sorting images, robotically inspecting sidewalks, and deriving new insights from city data is also underway. Although the pandemic has thrown a curveball in our ability to forecast a plan for Digital Kitchener initiatives, we've continued to respond to the emerging needs quickly and have continued to advance all pillars of Digital Kitchener: connected, innovative, on-demand, and inclusive. I'm incredibly proud of the work that has taken place and the outcomes that staff across the organization have delivered during this challenging time. That concludes the presentation. I am joined today by Ms. Zinn, the Lab Director for the Digital Kitchener Innovation Lab, and Ms. Bianchi, Manager of Digital Transformation and Strategy this morning, and we'll be happy to respond to any questions that committee may have.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Murray. Appreciate it. So questions of committee, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. It was quite impressive. I just have a question about, and I think this has been brought up before, and I don't know where it's landed, but is there thought of putting in or creating an app of some sort to identify sidewalks that are closed, or trails for that matter?
So I can speak to the trails. We are working on trying to get our trail network loaded into the Google web mapping, and through that process, it would do better traffic routing for the bike trails and the multi-purpose trails. I'll maybe ask Ms. Zinn to respond. She's worked very closely with the folks in our parks area, and if she has any more information on that.
So I don't have any specific information on the requests around mapping, closures of trails and sidewalks. However, that's certainly something that we could explore with the parks team and the relevant teams to see how they would best like to see that information conveyed and make sure it's updated and always up to date for the public if we were to put that out. So that's certainly something we can take away and follow up on.
Well, that'd be great, because especially sidewalks, right? Because it becomes an accessibility issue for some people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
Thank you. The lab is located at the Communitech building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. How many staff people are involved with that lab?
So obviously over the course of the pandemic, it's been difficult to bring people together. But we were, prior to the pandemic, staff were brought down to work with the lab staff there. So there's a number of co-ops that are brought in each term to support projects. So typically we were running people working out of that space, usually 3 to 4. So the lab director and whatever co-ops, and then city staff attending the space to work on projects. We haven't been able to use it just simply because of the nature of the time, and everything shifted to virtual quite well. And we're looking forward to getting back into the space. We have been able to get back in recently and start using it. It's just, we'll leverage it more fully once the timing is right.
What is the annual operating cost of that lab?
So the lab itself, we are given that space in kind through the support that is provided to Communitech. I can't recall offhand what that number was. The economic development has supported that, but we are not paying for the space in there. The only position that we have that is fully funded is the lab director role, and the other are co-ops, which are vary. So I would suggest we're probably in the area of about 200,000 a year for the staffing costs.
When does that agreement with Communitech end?
I believe it's a 4 or 5 year agreement, but again, I'd have to validate that with economic development.
And when did we start it?
Just I believe in June timeframe of this year.
Yeah. Okay. My final question is, I looked over and I did review the link that you had to. The question I wonder is where do we stand on meter reading for gas and water? Where do we stand on bringing that digitized so that we can have access to that without sending out meter readers?
So I'll ask Ms. Zinn to comment on this, as she's been working with Kitchener Utilities.
So early on in the pandemic, Kitchener Utilities was doing some work to explore this further and understand what the fit of the different solution options and challenges might be with implementing those. I understand they'll be bringing back information on that to council at some point in the future. So I don't have a firm timeline on that, other than we've been engaged through that process with Kitchener Utilities to explore which option would best suit the needs of the city, and understand more of also what the costs and return on investment might look like for that.
Do you know if our hydro company is set up to read meters without meter readers? Do they not have a system that's set up?
To my knowledge, all of the Ontario hydro companies are using smart metering for their meter reading.
Okay, and so I'm getting a little anxious as to when we do the same for our water and gas. But thank you for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Verbenovich.
Thanks, Chair Davey, and I think Councillor Gazzola and I share that. Because we both remember many years ago when both of us were staff, he in finance and me in IT, and going down to Buffalo, if I remember correctly, to look at a gas utility that was doing smart meter reading down there. Obviously, different jurisdiction, different laws, and all that kind of stuff. But it is something that I think we all anxiously await. Thanks for the report, Dan, and for the work Courtney and Sarah Beth on all of this. Couple questions. On the throughout the pandemic, have we still been able to hire our co-ops for the lab? Have we been able to keep that active?
I'll let Ms. In respond to that one.
Yes, we took a bit of a hiatus early on in the pandemic from bringing new co-ops on, but over the past year we've been able to bring 2 to 3 co-ops on each term, working primarily remotely through that very successfully in moving the projects ahead. So yes, we have continued to bring students in and get them engaged.
Awesome, because it is one of the things that I sort of often think about is just how we better engage with co-ops and provide more experiential opportunities in local government. So hopefully some of them choose us as a career choice as opposed to heading off to the private sector, which we know obviously there's lots of opportunities out there as well. Secondly, the other question I have, and it may be a bit more of a difficult one, and I recognize we may not have been able to make big inroads yet, but it's something that has come up both in dialogues with colleagues at Communitech and with other municipalities and so on. And it's around the whole procurement piece and finding ways for us to be able to, and not just us, but all governments, to be able to better support the innovation sector in the country and make some inroads in procurement as we pilot things, and then potentially in some instances go on to purchase those innovations or develop some sort of business relationship with those companies. How have we done on that front, and what are the roadblocks that remain, and how do we potentially advance this? Because it is an area that still very much comes up from startups and scale-ups.
So we have actually been able to, I wouldn't say we've gone all the way through a procurement process, but we have explored a few options. Many of them come in the way of a challenge, where a particular challenge that the municipality would have is taken on and put out using the existing tools that we already have for procurement. You can still put a challenge out. You don't necessarily know exactly what that solution looks like, but working with the various innovative companies in the area, we would be able to put that challenge out, select somebody based on a criteria, and then be able to move that forward. We've started a few processes in the past, and just due to timing and challenges that came up at the time, we weren't able to complete them. But it's certainly been an ongoing conversation, and the conversations that I've had with our procurement group, there's really no reason that we can't attempt to try one of these. We just need to have the right challenge and the staff available to work with a company to be able to formulate a solution that we could then look to procure.
Awesome. That's certainly great to hear. And I think if we do develop a working model, and once we've had an opportunity to explore it, that's something that we can share with others, because I know others are still trying to figure this out very much. So anyway, thanks. Well done. Great work over the last couple of years in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Just kind of maybe adding a little bit on to Councillor Gazzola's question about the metering. I know one of the things that got me excited when we were doing this was the ability to possibly let a citizen know if their water usage had jumped up, and maybe determining a leak in a toilet or a water softener, to let them know about that. Are we getting any closer to that?
So as an automated metering system would roll out, it would certainly include those types of features. That would be one of the primary things you'd want to see with that. One of the challenges that we have in Kitchener is because we have both the water and the gas, in order to save the money on the collection of the information, you need to essentially do both at the same time. Otherwise, you're still sending people out to do the meter reading, which adds a layer of complexity in terms of how to roll it out and how to get it into certain areas, replacing both of those systems at the same time so that you can then get that savings. That is part of the challenge, the timing of replacement of meters and on all of those things. So these are all the factors that are being considered by Kitchener Utilities in terms of being able to move that ahead. Once we get to a position where there's the capability to have that information streaming in, it's very easy to add that level of feature and be able to see strange usage patterns, generate alerts, and so on. But until that plan is rolled out, we're kind of stuck where we are at the moment.
Okay, well, that's great. Anything that we can do to speed that up is great, because I think all of us, councillor, had that one citizen said, hey, I've got an $800 water bill, so it'd be great to be able to tip them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, it's great news to see all of the different innovations that this group has been able to really get to work on, regardless of the pandemic. It's really, really cool. Just to follow up on the mayor's questions about procurement, it wasn't clear to me in your answer, Mr. Murray. Did you say that we have put out a challenge or that we haven't yet? And if we have, can you give us an example?
So we haven't, it hasn't been put out as a complete package. We did engage with folks at Communitech at one point in a program to start working on some different challenges, and we had identified a few that we were working through. Unfortunately, just due to the staffing at the city and the ability of our the areas where the challenges were to have staff participate in it, we weren't able to continue. So we've started the process but never completed it.
So is a challenge different than a request for solution? And I guess what I'm trying to understand is, once we have a successful solution that has been brought forward by a challenge, then do we have to do a second step to do a procurement process that's more traditional and sort of cater it to the solution that was identified?
So I would defer to our procurement folks for that. I think a lot of it is in how you set it up at the beginning.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh, sorry, there's Mr. Lautenbach. I'm trying to understand, can we not just get to this? Let's try. We've been talking about it for years. Let's find a way to do request for solution that is a one-time, process, so that we can get to, as the mayor was suggesting, there's so much innovation happening in our sector, but we have not caught up just with our little procurement challenges. Let's move forward, and I know we can do it. Mr. Lawton, sorry. Yeah,
so through the chair, there are strategic procurement options to us that we can take advantage of, very similar to what Mr. Murray was outlining in terms of challenges. We can look at creative solutions in terms of putting out an item that identifies what we're trying to solve, and so that aligns with sort of that challenge type of approach. So we are looking at more of these things in terms of procurement. One of the things that we are also looking at is our procurement bylaw, to make sure that we have flexibility to allow us to proceed on that. So that is something that we're planning to bring back to council in the new year for consideration. And so we'll be looking at many of those options that will provide some more flexibility for council.
Super. That's really good news, because it's been in the process for years since we developed the Digital Kitchener strategy in 2016, I think. What I want to ask then also is, how are new projects brought to the Innovation Lab, and how are these ideas prioritized? Are they measured against our strategic plan priorities, or are they determined by senior staff? Which ones should move forward?
Yes, so at this point, we're coming back to my apologies, to our corporate leadership team 3 times a year. And what we're doing is forecasting what projects are out there that are of interest and that people want to move forward. Many of them are related to our strategic plan, as those are the priorities of our business areas. So we're supporting those. We've done lots of things within the climate space and a lot of transportation planning. Those are brought and shared with our corporate leadership team, who is approving that work plan that we have, which allows us to then get the co-op students with the appropriate skills to be able to move those projects forward. So we've started this process this year. It's been working quite well, and it's really helping us line up what skills we need to have in the lab for each project that will be tackled.
Okay. Because it's a little, it's interesting to see some of the projects, and some of them are really quite surprising that I hadn't heard about until now. And it would be great to get some more frequent updates, just so we can understand. Like, this update is terrific, and I would love to see more frequent updates, even if they're smaller, not so fancy. Like, I love the new. I've never seen a presentation on that platform that you use, the Microsoft platform, but honestly, just a brief email or something would be fine. I just think it would be great to have some input as well from council on a more frequent basis to say, here, I like what you're doing. How about this one? Can we ask for staff to focus on, one of the many ideas that you've been working on? That's all. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you, Mr. Murray, for your presentation. I find this particularly exciting, and I think what you're hearing from council is that they do too, and that we would love to see kind of more opportunities to be working with our local innovators, our local businesses here, because we have so many really cool things going on here. So just kind of maybe to piggyback a little bit on Councillor Marsh, Councillor Schneider, and the mayor with some of their points. I agree. Having a look at how we do procurement, I think would be really important. Have we ever thought about having a pitch night for our local innovators from Waterloo Region come in and do something with maybe your team, the region, the other local governments as well, and have that opportunity to come in and tell us about some of the neat things that they're doing. I know that one of the things that Councillor Schneider brought up about the water meter piece, there are local companies working on solutions to that. Let's give them the opportunity to come in and tell us about it. And again, that will tie in with what our procurement policies and that are, but you know what, let's give them that opportunity. I think that I'd love to listen in on that. Maybe other councillors would as well. I think that would be a really great opportunity for us to learn about all the things that are going on here. So just a couple of thoughts about how we can maybe be more innovative. And I know this council, this is a council who supports you and your team in terms of moving things forward. And if we can help with some of the red tape pieces perhaps that are there in terms of us being able to support more local, then I'm happy to help champion that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I don't really have many questions, but actually it's funny because my colleagues touched upon just about everything that I was interested in talking about with respect to everything from the water meters to tying with Google Maps. It's been fantastic. But I do actually have to echo a lot of Councillor Marsh's comments. I know it's very difficult because it's effectively a team of one with co-op students. So there's definitely limitations to what we can do. But what I'm hearing from the rest of committee and I'm interested in myself is an opportunity to provide some input and focus. We know you can't do everything, but if there was an opportunity for us for staff to come back and say, here's 10 areas that are within our ability to affect, but we only have the capacity to do 3 or 4 of them. Can you help direct us and where we're where our interests are. I think that would make us feel a bit more connected to how we're moving forward in this. So, and I don't know if you wanted to, the pitch, I think is a great idea as well. Even getting offline interactions with counselors, because obviously just structuring stress sessions and stuff is very complicated and time consuming, but engaging with counselors individually for ideas that may not be feasible, but just so you're interested, we're out there in terms of where interests lie. So I don't have anyone else in the queue for questions. Is there any other comments? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, so further to some of the points that were made, I'm wondering if we can get a response from staff about whether or not they can come back to us within the next year to give us a further update for, to tell us what they're working on, and if there's any input that they can receive from us, that would be helpful.
For sure, and yeah, tying that into whenever the cycle is for getting the co-op students would probably be useful as well. Mr. Murray?
We can certainly come back. Obviously, it's been quite a while since we provided an update to committee because of the pandemic. We've been in a bit more response mode and shifting as we need to. The one challenge I would suggest is that we have to align with the business areas that are in a position to move something forward, as well as making sure that we can get the co-ops. So there's a number of pieces that have to fall into play, but I certainly welcome any opportunity that council and committee would want to provide us with direction on where they want to see us going, and we can provide more frequent updates as well. So I think we're more than happy to engage you, and I would love to be able to get members down to the lab and actually have some more time to a little more one-on-one and really show what sort of things. We've only covered a small amount of the work that has been accomplished in the last few years, so there's plenty of other items that we'd be quite happy to share with you.
Thank you very much. And I was remiss not to say too that I think we're fortunate we had this resource to help us push through the pandemic, because everyone was getting crushed at that time, and being able to connect is very important. Could I get a mover for the recommendation to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Marsh. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you guys, good work.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts interim operating model. There is no presentation for this, so just questions. Ms. Robson is here to answer any questions you might have. Mayor Urbanovic.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Ms. Robson, for the report. I guess my question is, and I know we're looking at this on an interim basis to carry us through the broader sort of review that we're looking at doing, and also ensuring stability for the symphony while trying to maximize access for other community groups. Do we feel that we've been able to sort of push this with the symphony enough to make sure that they understand our desire to make effective use of this space for community groups, and that what's in the report will in fact meet the demand? I just know that there are additional pressures looming. My understanding is that some of the facilities that have been used by community groups up in Waterloo are experiencing some technical upgrade issues that are going to impact space over the next while, and in fact that will only probably put more pressure on us, not just here, but at registry, and at which we're also dealing with today, as well as the center in the square. And so I'm just wondering if you can sort of respond to that.
My apologies for the interruption. I did want to note, Mr. Chair, once Ms. Robson responds to the mayor, that I do have a short presentation for her for this item, and there is a delegation as well.
Oh, my sincere apologies. I missed that. Why don't we?
Ms. Robson can hold on my question, and then we can maybe hear from the delegation, Councillor Davey or Chair Davey.
Yeah, very good. Yes, let's go ahead with the presentation. Apologies.
Great, thank you. All right, there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here today, Councillor Davey, and the committee to present a proposed interim operating model for the Conrad Centre for the Performing Arts. The interim model in our larger project is detailed obviously in the staff report, and I'll just speak to it really briefly here. We're really hopeful that the approach outlined here kind of does two major things. One, will support recovery in the performing arts locally, and I'll talk a little bit more about the impacts the pandemic has had on the performing arts sector. And then we also hope that this approach will provide an opportunity to really see how the fullest expression of this facility might look with the kind of increased use that we're hoping to support. Next slide, please. So as council will recall, the Conrad Centre for the Performing Arts was generously donated by the Conrad family in early 2021. It's a really remarkable facility and one that has really played an important role in our community and the performing arts since it was built over 20 years ago. And with the donation, the Conrad family had hoped that the facility could be brought to fuller life and really become a catalyst for local performing arts. And to us, that really means kind of increasing the usage of the facility and then also making it really suitable and accessible for local performing arts and arts organizations to support their growth and development. Next slide, please. So to achieve these, the goals, we've outlined a short and long-term approach to the facility. So phase one is our interim operating model, and that is the subject of the staff report in front of you and this presentation. So this approach looks at executing a short-term lease with the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, and then also proposes a grant program to presenters. And this is really to make the rental of the facility more accessible over the next 2 years, and to also support the delivery of live performances in the constrained environment presented by the pandemic and its recovery. The long-term development the development of a long-term operating model is in phase two, and that'll be the subject of a future report. So the first piece of that is looking at a comprehensive review of the operating model and a scope of work for that review, which will come back to council for your consideration in early 2022, and then consideration for potential long-term operating models also for council's consideration in 2022. Next slide, please. And I would be remiss if I didn't just mention a few things about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the performing arts. And as many of you know, the arts sector has been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. And I know this has been true also of some very significant key economic sectors like hospitality, where, you know, bringing people together in real life is really core to how performing arts functions. So obviously this has really been difficult in the sector, and there's been lots of really interesting programming and initiatives that the sector has undertaken and folks in the sector have undertaken. But, you know, the performing arts is really based on part of the key factor is ticket sales, and the margins for these productions are often very slim. So the disruption and then smaller house sizes has really provided a huge challenge for this sector. Thank you. Next slide. So just a few more, a little bit more about the proposed interim operating model. So the first piece is a short-term lease, 2 years, with the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. The Symphony has occupied the building and operated it for about the last decade, and has really developed some real core competencies in the specialized equipment and operations of this facility. I want to emphasize that this is a really sophisticated professional theater and obviously requires really particular kinds of skills and resources to operate. So continuing this relationship with the Symphony in terms of their operations with the facility ensures continuity moving forward, and I think will allow us to support increased usage immediately in the coming year, and as gatherings are more appealing and the sector recovers. Next slide, please. The second component of our phase 1 interim operating model is an event and performing arts grant for presenters. So this will be a grant administered by the city to those artists and arts organizations who wish to present in the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. So the Symphony currently operates the theater on a cost recovery basis. And the fee for cost recovery is often too expensive or really a stretch for some of our local performing arts groups. So this grant program that's worth up to $80,000 annually would provide up to 50% of the costs for these groups to present at the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. So this approach ensures that the facility is affordable to the local performing artists and arts organizations who wish to present, and also ensures that the Symphony isn't operating this facility at a deficit to their organization. This grant program will provide this funding as a priority to local performing artists and arts organizations. Next slide, please. And then phase 2, as mentioned earlier, is a comprehensive review of the operating model for the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. So our next task coming out of this is to prepare a scope of work in terms of reference for the development of this long-term operating model. And this scope of work will return to Council for your consideration in early 2022. Next slide, please. So all of this being said, you've got the recommendations that are outlined in the staff report that look at executing a short-term lease with the Symphony for the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts, that we initiate the grant program as outlined in the staff report, and that there's some delegated authority to execute those grant agreements, and that staff return with the scope of work in terms of reference for the long-term model at the operating model at the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. And I'm happy to answer the mayor's questions and others that arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robson, for your presentation. I think before we get to questions, actually, I believe the clerk said there is a delegation for this item.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Sherratt. When you're ready. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. My name is Brendan Sherratt. I'm the past president of Kitchener-Waterloo Musical Productions. We're a nonprofit community theater group that's been in this community since 1948. Today, I'm speaking on the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. KWMP, for the most part, is a self-funded organization. We aim to provide residents of Waterloo Region a chance to experience high-quality community theater, both on and off stage. We typically produce 2 to 3 shows per year and endeavor to make those shows affordable, entertaining, and inclusive while providing training for the next generation. Our members and audience are a cross-section of this community. And we also operate a community arts center located at 14 Shaftesbury Drive, close to Ottawa Street North and Lackner Boulevard. This art center provides affordable rehearsal space to dozens of local arts groups. And the Arts Center is predominantly funded through ticket sales of our shows and our rentals. We've produced shows in nearly every single theater in the region, including 8 shows at the Conrad Center over the years. While most of our shows have broken even, we have yet to produce a show at the Conrad Center that has done so. Yet, I believe the Conrad Center is the best option for groups like ours. Next slide, please. The Registry Theater is the most affordable option on the list. But yet when we produce a show, we need to take 2 weeks of rental time in order to meet the demand for our tickets, which is taking away from several other groups that could be using that space. Just to give a context for price-wise, it's a 160-seat theater and it costs about $4.50 per seat to rent that space based on our models with no technical staff. In the past, KWMP has put on large blockbuster musicals at the Center and Square with casts of 80. We produced shows from the time that venue opened until 2013, where we left due to high cost of renting the space and lack of availability in their calendar. For context, 2,000 seat venue, and it costs us about $22 a seat. Now the studio theater, some people have asked about, in my opinion, and this is mine, it is not a viable theater. It costs us about $45.30 per seat, and it's a 150 seat theater. So it just doesn't make economic sense to produce a show in that space. Humanities Theater is a great theater, but it's predominantly used for schools, and you have to work around class schedules. It's a 670 seat venue, and it's about $12 per seat. Next slide, please. The St. Jacobs Country Playhouse, however, is a perfect venue for us. But the success of Drayton Entertainment has meant that they've expanded their season, and groups like us, we just can't get in there. And that's great success for Drayton Entertainment. We cheer them on. For context, it's 400 seat theater. It costs about $16 per seat. The Conrad Center, we produced a lot of shows there, but we've had difficulty getting into that space due to lack of availability in their rental calendars, the high cost of renting the space, and frankly, the lack of awareness of the general public of this venue. We have to educate the majority of our audience of what the Conrad Center is. It's a 260 seat venue in wraparound, but we haven't, unlike other venues, we've never been able to really fill that space. And it costs about $10 per seat. Next slide, please. This grant program will work, and I have the data to prove it. Last year, we received a $20,000 funding from the KW Community Foundation to create a pay what you can program to offer subsidized rehearsal space in our art center to help groups recover from COVID-19. The number and variety of requests blew us away, with the majority of the groups being able to pay 50% or more of the posted rental rates, and some even offering to pay above the posted rate to support other groups. Groups were able to access this rehearsal space in a safe, clean, and reliable manner. This relatively small investment has had an outsized impact on their local arts community, and we've doubled the impact of the funding, allowing us to produce shows without having to worry that we'll sell enough tickets in order to pay the operating costs of our space. While I'm sure the grant will be successful, it's important to see the impact and benefit of this grant, but also who is left out. The grant will make it so that renting the Conrad Center is on par with renting the Registry Theater. And so for only a few $100 more, Grace could rent the Conrad Center, including getting paid technical staff, which will undoubtedly pull rentals away from the Registry Theater. I encourage the city to consider offering a similar program to the Registry Theater and other similar venues. The KW Symphony is a great organization, and they've done a lot to benefit our community, but their core mandate is not to run a theater. And as the report indicates, they don't have the organizational capacity to run this space successfully. I would strongly encourage the city to expedite their search for additional organizations who could run this venue and make the Conrad Center a true cultural hub. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I found it personally quite informative. Okay, I had the people that had questions of Ms. Robson in order here. Mayor Verbanovich, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Schneider, and Councillor Gazzola. If you could queue out, if you put your hand down, sorry, and raise your hand if you do have a question for Mr. Sharrat.
Through the chair, I do apologize for the interruption, but we do have one more individual who has joined the call, who I believe is another delegation for Greenlight Arts.
Perfect.
When the committee is ready for them.
I appreciate the heads up. Thank you. So does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sharrat? Councillor Marsh.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Sharrat, for your presentation. It's a lot of research that you did, and I really appreciate the insights. You mentioned earlier that you recommend that the city provide a similar grant to the registry, even though it looks like the registry cost per seat is quite a bit lower than Conrad right now. Can you help me understand why?
Yeah, So the Registry Theater, while more affordable than the Conrad in the current model, with this grant funding, which let me be clear, I am, as a producer, we need this funding. But I also look at the other venues and how they're affected. And so the Registry Theater, it would be on par. And one thing that I quickly glossed over, which forgot to mention, was the fact that the Registry Theater is the only turnkey theater in our region, which means you bring your own technical staff, they provide the lights and all that, but you can run that, which gives you a lot of that cost savings. Now, with the Conrad Center being 100 seats more, that's 100 seats additional tickets that you can sell. And when it with a 50% discount, it could make it about the same cost as the Registry Theater. And granted, the Registry Theater is at capacity right now, but I wonder about other groups that might graduate to the Conrad Center and how that could potentially affect that space.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on making sure. Well, it sounds like there's a need that outperforms the capacity of each theater. So hopefully both will be, as full as possible, given the pandemic as well. That factors in. But anyway, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thanks, Chair Davey. Brendan, thanks a lot for coming and speaking and for sharing your presentation. With the Conrad Center, how often would you like KW Musical Productions to have access each year? Would you like to have 1 or 2 shows in there?
Ideally, we would like 4 weeks over 2 shows. And that's one arts group. The problem that with a lot of these theaters is every group wants the same time frame. Same issue that happens with the Center and the Square and many of these. But in an ideal world, in a post-COVID world where the audiences come back, ideally the Conrad Center would be we would learn to put on shows in that space, and that we put on 2 shows, 4-week, 2-week runs in that space. At different 6 months apart kind of thing.
Okay, and then you mentioned the need for some skills in being able to manage the bookings. What are the things that it would be important to you for the person who's doing the bookings so that your group can have access and a variety of other groups can have access? What are the needs for that person?
I think it's the core goal of the organization. And so I'll speak to this as I mentioned, we run a rehearsal space in our facility. And it took a mindset change in order to think about this space as our space versus a community space. So when we were putting on giant musicals at the Center and the Square, we could make, we needed to take the whole space. And so we would move other groups out of the way in order to say, okay, for these 3 months, we're building sets and all these things, and it's our space. And that's that mindset of we own this space, we're the primary tenant of it. With the Registry Theater and other venues, the primary tenant is the community. And so there is no vested interest in saying that this space is rehearsal first and performance second. And as the mayor indicated earlier in his comments, questions to Emily, understanding that difference, I think, is important. And to say, if your primary goal is to put on shows at the Center and the Square for the symphony, for instance, they're going to use the space to rehearse, and they'll find bookings around that. But if your primary use for the Conrad Center is as a community art space, then then that group will work around rehearsal around shows. And so that's just that fundamental switch in mentality.
Okay, and just my final question, you've done a wonderful thing with the pay what you can rehearsal space with the ability of more groups being able to use the Conrad Center for performance. Do you foresee maybe more requests for your facility to be used as a rehearsal space by these groups?
Yeah, so our space, we're lucky in that the footprint of our space is actually larger than the theater space, the performance space in the Conrad Center. So yes, we do see this as a benefit to us, or potential benefit. We need to work on making sure that we're getting out there and connecting with people and letting them know that it's an option. We did receive additional funding from the KW Community Foundation to continue our Pay What You Can fund. It was not the full amount. And so we are very thankful for that funding, but we will not be able to provide the same amount of support as we did last year. I would love to come back to City Council in the future to request additional funding for that program, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Okay, well, just thanks again for coming in, and thanks for the quite cooperative spirit you have within the arts community. Thank you.
And I think that's also key here. It's like we are cooperative in this community. There's a lot of, it's not what's mine, give. Like a lot of this community at this point is that cooperative nature. So just leave it there.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Brendan, for coming in your presentation, and quite frankly, the great work that KWMP has done for so many years in our community, long before even I think either of us were around. What I do want to ask you as a follow-up to some of the questions in your presentation is, as we look at this, do you think, while our focus is primarily on the Conrad Center and how to make it more available to the broader community as a whole, do you think there's more work to be done around, collaboration amongst all these facilities, to sort of make sure that the right thing is happening in the right place at the right time? Whether it's size of audience, rehearsal space, performance space, and so on. And should that in fact be part of our conversation, recognizing that, there's some things we have the ability to control and other things we only have the ability to influence based on who, owns the facility.
Yeah, so I would love that to be part of this discussion, but on the scale that makes sense. So obviously the city has 3 amazing theaters in this area, but they are at different scales. The Center and the Square has different issues than the Registry Theater and the Conrad Center. And our rehearsal space, for instance, is at a different scale than the Center and the Square. So my concern with that is scope creep. I do project management for a living, so I understand that the issues there. And while I think it should be addressed, I would suggest that looking at a collaborative approach between the Registry Theater, the Conrad Center, and hopefully KW Musical Productions Arts Center would make a lot of sense. But keeping it at that similar scale, similar organizational goals. So yes, I would definitely be supportive of that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you to the mayor for sort of leading the question that I kind of want to ask further. So I guess when you want to book an event at the city right now and everything else, where do you go through to do that?
When I'm looking to book a theater in this case, yes. So you would contact the theater themselves. Typically, this is done a year and a half in advance or more. And so that is also a thing that I would warn council about while we're talking about the 2022 season, that calendar year that a lot of groups have already planned, and it will take a year for you to see some of these bookings kind of returning. So just make sure that we put that out there. But the current way that we would book is to email the theater directly, whether it's the Center and the Square, the Registry Theater, or the Conrad Center. Right now, the Conrad Center is managed through a partnership with Greenlight Arts, which is doing a fantastic job managing that space on behalf of the symphony. They have helped, I think, understand the usability of that space, and advocate for changing around some rules, which has been helpful, but we're not 100% there yet. So,
okay. So, in your opinion, it would make more sense to maybe have one point of a contact to be able to have access to numerous facilities within the city.
Yeah, so I've never dealt with it in that way, but ideally, I think that could be a lot of benefit if we were seeing, because the Conrad Center and the Registry Theatre are very similar size, being able to say, hey, like, if we move it to the Conrad Center versus the Registry, we can get 4 groups into the Registry Theatre, and those groups are more likely to produce shows and sell them out at that venue versus the other venue. So yes, having that organizational overview of those venues, I think would be quite beneficial. The thing is, it does still need to move fast, and be able to make adjustments to plans as we're going. So
I agree. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Marsh.
Sorry, just to follow up. So Arts Build Ontario, I thought, had like a chart that gets updated frequently about rehearsal and performance spaces that are available. Are those still, is that still used by the sector, Mr. Charette, and would that be part of the solution that you're talking about?
Yeah, unfortunately, that program ended. It wasn't due to Arts Build. The organization that ran that platform closed up shop. So that platform is no longer available. It was very helpful for our organization, but it was helpful in an information sharing model, not necessarily a booking. If you were to talk to somebody who runs the space and you need to like move around things and say, okay, this is your ideal date, but can you do it 2 weeks earlier? That we can make it work. And that's just, you need to put it on paper and you need to look at it and work with all your stakeholders in order to put together a season that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just my questions left, Mr. Stratton. Again, thank you for taking the time. I found your seating graph incredibly informative, and I'm not sure, I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but I've never seen a comparison like that before, and it's a real eye opener for me. So can you remind me what's the per seat cost of the Registry Theatre?
Yeah, sorry, let me just pull up my deck there. The per seat cost, and then granted, so this is based on our calculations, based on everyone having the same cost and all related to that. And it was $4.50 per seat. And again, that's with no technical support. Whereas the Conrad Center being $10, that does give you that technical support. And so that you need to take that into account as well as a different type of model there.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And sorry, and that $10, was that the historical price or is that the new price with the grant?
That is the historical price as is, yes.
Okay, so that would bring it in line. Okay, good. So my other question was, I guess in the fullness of time, supposing the symphony wasn't there, would you prefer to see the Conrad Center run the same way as the Registry Theatre?
Ideally, I would, yes and no. Because it is a different venue, there is different requirements. So the venue has catwalks, which require safety procedures. That is not an issue that when you go into the Registry Theatre. So yes, ideally, I would love it to be a turnkey. Here's the code, you can get in and use it. That dramatically reduces the cost. You have the option to hire technical staff, but I'm also mindful that it is a different venue and different things apply to that. I'll also mention that that chart, if you'd like to take a look at it again, Councillor Snyder forwarded it around about 3 weeks ago in an email. And so you can play with the data yourself if you'd like. So
Okay, great. And the clerk, I think, hopefully has a copy of that, so it can be forwarded to committee. There is another question actually from Councillor Gazzola.
No, the only question I was going to ask, there was a lot of good information in that presentation, and I understand it is available. So that's all I would like to get a copy of it. That's all. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm also happy to give a tour of our art center at any time if you'd like. Happy to answer any questions in person.
Okay, thank you very much, Brendan, for taking the time today. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate all of your hard work on this. I know it's not an easy situation, so I applaud you guys for dealing and taking this on. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, and there is one more delegation. Looks like Mr. White from Greenlight.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
And good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to see you all over Zoom. Some of you I haven't seen in almost 2 years. I think most of you know me. I'm Matt White, and I am the artistic director of Greenlight Arts, the theater company I founded here in Kitchener with my wife, Karen Lowerson, back in 2014. I'm originally from here before relocating to Toronto to pursue a career in theater as an actor and producer. But some of my favorite experiences as a performer were here with Theatre and Company back in the day at the Conrad Centre, which back then was called the King Street Theatre Centre. Working in the indie theater scene in Toronto would sometimes find us rehearsing in spaces without any heat in the middle of winter, or performing in spaces where the dressing room was literally a broom closet or converted attic. So being in this purpose-built theater with flexible seating in my hometown, AKA not Toronto, was something I was proud to show off to visiting artists. I would emphatically claim, look at what can happen here in Kitchener. I mean, the dressing rooms can make you feel like, I don't know, like you're on Broadway sometimes, right? The lobby is a gathering place where relationships have the space to be created and continued. The theater, well, I mean, what a treat to be in that space. I mean, flexible performance area, so you can see 3 plays staged in very different configurations. That is something only a few theaters in Toronto can offer. And bonus, unlike some theaters in Toronto, you don't actually hear a train going by every 20 minutes. Most importantly, as a company, as an artist, you feel special at the Conrad Centre. So if you can't tell by now, I'll spell it out. I care about this space a lot. For me, it's more than just a building. It's more than a place to do whatever you can do. It's a place where everyone has the opportunity to grow your artistic practice. In a lot of ways, it's been a home away from home for me, which is one of the driving points behind why Karen and I reached out to Andrew Bennett at the KW Symphony in March 2019 to ask about how we could help animate the space in exchange for Greenlight Arts to carve out some time and space to make the Conrad our artistic home. As I'm sure you are all abundantly aware, and as Brendan pointed out, performance venues in Kitchener fall into 2 extremes. The affordable spaces are always booked. The available spaces are too expensive. And the Conrad always fit into that second category for us. So stretching a few $1,000s just couldn't reach a space like the Conrad. But up against the reality that other spaces in town, like the Registry, are always booked, we came up with a plan. Karen and I would oversee rentals of the facility in exchange for a modest fee for service we allocate to covering rental costs of the performance venue. We moved our office into the admin floor to work in November 2019. We started getting a better sense of the community of renters, the logistics of the Conrad, and started setting out our plan to increase the activity there. Then COVID happened. And then Manfred Conrad generously donated the space to the city. But always the question persists: how to truly make it affordable for companies like Greenlight Arts, or dance companies, community theater like KWMP, or independent artists who can access the space. How do we increase that accessibility? How can these other artists have the opportunity to feel that empowerment of staging their work in this glorious space when it is so darn expensive? So enter Emily Robson and this plan put forward by the staff. I mean, it really does have the potential to be a complete game changer at a time when artists can use this kind of investment in the work they are doing. Yes, the money is reallocated to the symphony in this relationship, but it is going there to run the building and maintain a professional standard. I don't know if it will ever be a turnkey theater because of the stakes. That catwalk, as Brendan mentioned, you need to have special permission to work at heights at that level. This subsidy enables the renter to actually get their foot in the door. In some instances, it can be the difference between doing a show and not doing a show. Now, furthermore, as I am sure it is not lost on you, the more activity in the theater means the more people downtown engaging with the space and all the wonderful restaurants, cafes, stores, and experiences downtown Kitchener has to offer. Seeing the city take the lead on this kind of initiative sends a positive message to the artists and organizations around town. This is a practical solution that can make a real difference. Give artists a chance, enable and welcome artists into that space so we can play inside and bring audiences along on the journey. Needless to say, I strongly support this plan. And Karen and I are excited to help, and I can answer any other questions, similar questions that came up. Now, we just hope that you greenlight this whole thing so we can get to work. Thanks very much for your time.
Councillor Schneider.
Thanks, Chair Davey. Matt, thanks for coming in. I just wish you could be a little more enthusiastic and excited about this, but hey, that'll come. Just wondering, one of the things that we've all heard as councillors is, the need for that space. And there are a lot of groups who are going to want access to the space here at the Conrad Center. I know that you're looking after and helping with the booking of it. How can we kind of be assured and comfortable that there's going to be as much access to as many varied groups as possible?
That's a great question. That is part of our goal. It's always been part of our goal when, especially taking the time to really see the companies and the organizations that need the space, like dance companies, putting on dance competitions, the community theater companies, the independent artists. I mean, one of the, before COVID hit, the Crime Prevention Council had a movie night, trying to get as many people from the community as possible so that the space, while run at a professional level, is accessible to the wide community, as wide a net as we can possibly reach.
Okay, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for coming in. My question was along the same lines, but I also would like to ask, it's if what Brandon said, the booking is a year to a year and a half ahead of time. So this is a 2-year lease. What do you see happening 2 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that 2 years from now, I think how I'm looking at what we have the next 2 years for, and whether it's jump starting in the next 6 months, but really using this as a beta test to try to get ahead of 2 years from now, so that we, maybe a year into this, we start to look at, do we extend this plan by another year? I mean, in some instances, some companies aren't getting their funding until 6 months before. So, I mean, yes, with some companies like KWMP, we've already had an email correspondence with them. Other companies don't reach out until, sometimes it's like, what's available next week. I think for the stability of the community moving forward, I think it's not, what we can't get into is say, well, let's just take the next 2 years to figure this out. I think we start tomorrow sorting out, okay, so if this can work, what kind of things can we put in place so that when this expires in 2 years, there is not a contingency is the wrong word, but that there is a commitment to the organizations that can be proactive and can book ahead and say, look, we are going to acknowledge this. It could even be built into any contracts that we draft between now and then for that year, that if, that we understand, and whatever the circumstance is in 2 years, that your rental would be secure. I hope that answers your question. I apologize, it was a bit long-winded, but I hope we got there.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult question because we don't know, what the next 2 years are going to look like. But I also wondered, do you envision at all partnering with the school board to fill some of the gaps that might arise or might be there?
That would be wonderful. I mean, there's also, I have floated with the university. I know logistics of class schedules have sort of been hiccups so far, but I mean, I think anything and everything is up for discussion, and I would be super excited to, as Brendan pointed out, a lot of people, it's still trying to get them aware that is a purpose-built theater. And sometimes even the restaurant across the street, when it was the Berlin, I remember going and talking to the chef and saying, well, we operate out of the Conrad Center, and he didn't know what I was talking about. And so I know that trying to get people aware of that space is as much of a priority or it can be as much of a priority as trying to get arts organizations in there. I think the two of them work hand in hand. So if there was an opportunity to get, kids down there, I think that would be really exciting, or even if it started with having PD Day training sessions down there and have, like the bat phone to Greenlight to be like, when's the next PD Day? Let's get your teachers down into one of the spaces. I mean, there's a gorgeous rehearsal hall they could use. Theoretically, there's breakout rooms that could be facilitated. And, and so at the very tip of the iceberg, just getting some teachers down there to be conscious that that's a workable space for them. That would be a great start.
Right. Thank you. And keep up the great work. I've seen many of your performances, and I'm always quite impressed. I love the provocative sort of nature of what you produce. So thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. That means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we have Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. White, for coming in and sharing your passion and your experience with this center. The previous delegate mentioned something about potential impacts on other theaters, like, for example, the Registry. Can you speak to your ability to collaborate with, or what you think the solution might be? I mean, of course, you would be able to collaborate. I'm just wondering how easy would it be for theater spaces to communicate back and forth to figure out the best schedules?
Yeah, no, I think thank you for the question, Councillor Marsh. I think that it's exciting, when we sort of put it all out on the table and go, what is possible, right? Let's have these open conversations and say, look, maybe this company over at the Registry is ready to kind of graduate and have a larger audience and bring them over to the Conrad. And then what that does, then that frees up some space. If a company is more emerging, maybe they have a smaller audience to start, so they don't necessarily need something the size and the scope of Conrad, then they can go into the Registry. Now that space is open for them. The other thing that I love the opportunity, because the Registry, sometimes what gets lost, the Registry also has a fantastic programmer in Lawrence Follows, and Lawrence, sorry, not Lawrence Follows, that's Lawrence McNaught. Lawrence Follows was an acting teacher of mine back in the day. I haven't said his name in a long time. Sorry, Lawrence McNaught is a fantastic programmer. And what I love the possibility too is that maybe in conversation, we can say, look, is there something that wants to have a night at the Conrad Center? I think it's still in a perfect world, it is still a situation where having the autonomy of each organization is probably the like it's best suited at this point, as opposed to having a centralized one person trying to handle everything. For notwithstanding the fact that that would be a lot of work for one person. So then you're adding probably a bunch of administrative channels if you have to have one central person. So I caution about that, the workload balance. But I think what it is it's, having the experience of working at 44 Gaukel back before we moved into the Conrad Center, seeing how the lines of communication work there, where you have, weekly meetings as a team, whether it's weekly meetings or monthly meetings where we get together and say, look, or we have a planning week where we articulate that, in March or February, we may have a good sense of what's coming down in programming and what we've heard from rentals. And we go, okay, so what can you do? What should we take on? How can we help each other? And just, I think having this sort of beta testing of a program gives us the opportunity to beta test how we can communicate and the channels through that way.
Okay, thanks. So my last question is just about the 80,000 that's being considered here for groups to be able to access the Conrad that might not otherwise be able to. Do you anticipate some administrative time that would be added to your to Greenlight Arts time, to do some back and forth to make sure that each applicant is Conrad Center ready, and to have, I'm just guessing that it can't all be here, go talk to the city and then come back to us. I just feel like there's going to be some back and forth. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that to have a proper, healthy relationship with a rental organization, it takes time. It takes commitment and energy, and there's a lot of emailing back and forth and site visits. And we just did the Karen worked very closely with the team at the museum for their Unzipped opening festivities, and there's like 20 hours or more of on-person site visits, emails, communication, the nuance. And that does come at a cost. I mean, at this point in time, we do have, like I said, a modest fee that we receive, and that was based. We also pay for an office. It's only $210, so it's lower than most office space in the city. But there's definitely, as we're watching our workload expand, we are starting to go, okay, we will have to figure out how we can help with the growth, yeah.
So that's a question for perhaps to explore further another day, but I'm just I just wanted to know your perspective on that. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for the questions.
For taking the time today to come in and share your perspective. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, take care now.
You too.
Okay, so we will go back to the questions of staff. I'm not sure, Ms. Robson, if you recall Mayor Urbanovich's question, or if you'd like him to repeat it, I'll leave it to you.
Yes, through the chair. Excuse me. I think I recall it was a question about kind of the capacity at the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony to accommodate the increased, activity that's proposed under the interim operating model. Is that?
Yeah, both. I guess the capacity and just wanting to really understand that they, fully understand that this is a priority for us as a city. I mean, that was, I think, part of why the Conrad family so generously donated it to us, and so really wanting to make sure that this has the best possible chances of success to see the facility maximized.
Great. Through the chair, thanks for that clarification. Mayor. So I think the delegations in particular from Mr. White might have kind of spoken to this a little bit. So the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony currently has an agreement with Greenlight Arts and had established it, as Matt mentioned, in November 2019 to facilitate the rentals of the theater. And this was really a recognition on the symphony's part, and then the interest obviously on Matt and Karen's part to kind of start to see that facility in a higher and more used, and some of the challenges that folks who are renting were facing. So the increased capacity that is presented by Matt and Karen, and then also the funds that we're making available for the presenting organizations, I think really will go a long way in supporting the symphony to be able to respond to these the anticipated increased usage. The symphony has been really it's been a collaborative process to kind of propose this interim model. So I do believe that they understand the priority that this has for the city, and that the proposed solution also understands that they've been currently operating that facility at the theater portion on a cost recovery basis. So the proposed solution here is wanting to increase the usage, but not have that come at an operating loss for the symphony in particular. And maybe the one last point that I'll make about this is I think there's also a recognition among the partners here that the long-term version of the Conrad Center is not kind of what we see it as today. And really what's being proposed as this interim model is a step to kind of have an immediate impact while kind of we right size or kind of figure out what the exact right operating model is and the operating partners to deliver against the mandate that we have for the Conrad Center. So in short, I feel confident that there is capacity and willingness on the part of the partners and the symphony in particular to accommodate the additional usage that's proposed.
Okay, well, that's certainly encouraging to hear. I'm just wondering, it would be, as part of this process with the 2-year extension, it would be reasonable to sort of have you maybe at like the 6-month and year-and-a-half mark, do like an email update to council of how things are going, and then maybe at the 1-year mark, bring a report to committee just in terms of how things are going. So we're not leaving it for 2 years, but in fact are keeping it actively on the table. Would that be reasonable?
Through the chair, of course, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Going from before, next is Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Can I just add to the request that the mayor just gave? Could we get an overview of what the booking has looked like, say over the last well, I know with the pandemic it's kind of difficult, but maybe going back to 2018 to date, if that's not too much to ask, just so we can see, where we're starting and where we land and as we move forward. Thank you.
Through the chair, we can do that, and just kind of at a high level. Before the pandemic, the facility was typically booked about 55 days a year, and with the proposed plan with the grant program, we're hoping to increase that to 85 days for the year. So we've got some metrics that we're aiming towards. So that I can find the information that you've requested, Councillor Chapman, and that can also be the target that we're measuring against for reporting back.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. I had you from before. Did you still have a question on staff or no?
My question was just asking how we're going to ensure that, booking will be done fairly and the wide group will have access. And I think Matt addressed that. My concern is, will Greenlight have autonomy, or will the symphony be able to kind of say, no, we don't want to do that? So that I think Matt will do a great job. I just want to make sure that, what he said actually happens. So is that, do you feel comfortable that's the way it's going to work?
Through the chair, Councillor Schneider. So, I think what's been really interesting to observe is this really productive and symbiotic relationship between the symphony and Greenlight Arts. And obviously, as Matt mentioned, the increased use of the facility also increases the scope of work for Greenlight Arts. And I think the mayor had referenced the theater at the university being shut down, and that has really increased the number of requests for the Conrad over the last couple of weeks. So I want to just emphasize that it's a very positive relationship between Greenlight Arts and the symphony. And there's also a process here of kind of accommodating a variety of different needs and, those who wish to rent it, the dates that the symphony needs to use the facility plus the others. So it is, as Matt mentioned, a process in relationship building and people making compromises where they need to. So they have a good working relationship. And obviously there's some work potentially for them to do as the scope of Greenlight Arts work increases with the increased use, but they have a great place to start in that conversation.
Yeah, just one more quick question. I know we've heard from the museum that they would like to use that as a space as well to augment the art exhibit. Is that going to be a possibility?
Through the chair, the program that the grant program that we're offering is really prioritizing performing arts. So there's also a variety of uses that are possible in the center, and this is also subsidizing those who can't afford it with this grant program, and then also testing out what is the variety and breadth of programming that makes sense in that facility. So I think I don't have an exact specific answer to your question other than the museum's request will be considered in the calendar and within the eligibility of the grant program as presented.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
Hey, I'm a little confused. Actually, I'm a lot confused about what's going on here. From what I understand, our staff will be approving these grants, will they not? So they're the ones who will have control as to who gets what. Is that not right?
Through the chair, Councillor Gazzola, you're correct insofar as staff will determine who receives the grant program or the grant funds to subsidize their use of the Conrad Center. The process, however, is that those who wish to use the Conrad Center will negotiate with the symphony for the dates that they wish to book and for the costs of their booking at the Conrad Center. So they will bring that information to the application process within the city, and we will refer to the agreement, the draft agreement that has been prepared by the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony for the use of the facility. So staff will determine who receives the grant allocation, but will not be in control of the booking calendar.
But once they've been approved for the booking, are staff going to turn them down at that point? I don't see that happening, but never mind. Currently, there are 55 different nights or times that the hall has been booked out. Who received the money for those bookings? Did that go to the symphony or what?
So the current process, and again, the 55 dates are historical from 2019. In the current operating model, what will happen is a group will contact the symphony, request the dates that they wish to book at the Conrad Center, and an agreement is drawn up, which both parties sign, and that specify the costs associated with the rental. There is typically some kind of settling of that agreement after the production takes place, but those rental fees are directed or paid to the symphony as the facility operator.
What has happened to the $38,000 rental cost that the symphony has paid in the past? Where has that gone?
Through the chair, so currently, so we're in the first year of an overholding lease agreement with the symphony. So that $38,000 has been collected into a capital account, and then those are the funds that we will use in part to provide the grant subsidy.
What costs are the city going to incur? The symphony is really just paying for operating costs. Like who's paying for lighting and things like that?
Through the chair, so the symphony as the facility occupant and as the leaseholder, so they're paying the rent that you've identified, the $38,000 annually. And then they also pay a cost related to the operating, the cost related to the facility. One moment. My apologies. So they also pay the utilities, the common area maintenance fees, and also costs related to the operating of the building. There was a budget issue paper related to the capital for the facility that was included in the budget process that will be the city's expense.
Yeah, I tried to find that last night and I couldn't, but it is in the capital section somewhere. Yeah.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, I'll look again. The only other question I have, is that hall blacked out often now? Are there a lot of free nights available if we're going to try to add another 25 nights to the already 55 nights and add to that when the symphony itself performs? Are there a lot of nights available?
There is capacity at that facility to be more fully booked, yes. And I think I want to clarify too, there are booked dates and then performance nights. So often if there is a performance, companies or organizations book a number of days leading up to the performance run. So you might have 55 booked dates, but that doesn't necessarily equate to 55 performances. So we believe there is capacity for additional dates to be booked at the facility.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Just again, wondering, just since we'll be reporting back anyway, would it be possible when the report comes back to see which organizations actually receive the grants? Yes, okay, very good. The other thing I just wanted to push a little bit further on Councillor Gazzola's question on the number of nights. I'm not familiar with how the Conrad Center is run. My only real experience is Center in the Square. So my question is that 85 number of nights comparable to other facilities of this, actually any facility really?
Yeah, through the chair. So when we talk about booked dates, for example, and I think it was 2017 numbers, the Registry Theatre was around 250 booked days. So the target here that we have of 85 is significantly lower, but a big increase from what historically has been the case at the Conrad Center.
Okay, but understanding in the fullness of time, like this is an interim thing, but in the fullness of time, I think this committee would like to see that closer to 200 than 85. So will that be something that we'll be looking at in 2 years' time once this interim is passed?
Through the chair, yeah. So the focus of the developing the long-term operating model will indicate kind of what is the mix of programming, what number of dates are we shooting for, what is the projected kind of revenue and the resources required to operate that facility against its mandate. So I think the kind of question that you're asking is exactly what we hope to answer in the development of this long-term operating model.
Very good. And last question. And I have to ask this because whenever there's any sort of new policy or something like that, I have to look at it as to how it can be abused. So my question is, do we have any assurance that the Symphony will pass on the fullness of the savings from the grant, from the rental fees that they charge?
Through the chair. So, I mean, this is part of the process or the thought process behind the procedure that we've outlined. So we'll be able to see the quote from the Symphony for the Conrad Center for the group who wishes to present. So that will be submitted to the city as part of the granting process. So we'll be able to see how that quote has been structured. So yes,
okay.
There's a way of an insight into that.
So that's helpful, Ms. Robson. So just as a heads up, that's something when this comes back in 6 months or a year, I don't think what the time is, that's a calculation I would like to see as a result. Again, I obviously there's going to be inflationary increases and that sort of thing, but we need to make sure that these grant dollars are being passed on to the performance groups. Okay, a couple more people have queued in. I believe Councillor Gazzola was first.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot the one question I wanted to ask. Has any consideration ever been given to having the Center in the Square operate this facility? Because they've already got the staff, they're doing those things, and surely when I look at the Drayton Theatre, how they're operating all kinds of theaters, would there not be savings if the Center in the Square looked after this?
Through the chair, that question, Councillor Gazzola, is one that will be considered as part of the development of his long-term operating model. So there's this facility, obviously the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts. And as the delegates mentioned, the city also owns the Center in the Square and the registry. So I think how this facility relates to the other performing arts facilities, the different components and functions of each of their operations, it will be part and can be considered as part of this comprehensive review. So I don't have an answer to that question yet, but that will be included in the scope of work coming up in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks. Ms. Robson, I was pleased to hear you say that the increased bookings you're hoping to see here will not negatively impact the operational capacity of the symphony. So, but can you help me understand, let's say we do get those 85 days booked and then we have, desire for more. My turn to apologize for the noise. So what I'm trying to understand is at some point it's a lot of time to do the back and forth with negotiating times and dates and details. And I'm just wondering how the city is able to support the symphony's operations in making sure it doesn't become too cumbersome.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Marsh. Kind of 2 points on this. So the $80,000 grant allocation or availability of that granting pool and what that kind of covers in terms of the cost at the Conrad Center, all of that was developed in partnership with the Symphony. So they provided information on kind of what it actually costs them to facilitate rentals. And that included some costs related to the administration and staffing. So it should scale adequately for the Symphony, so they're not put in a position where they're at a loss for facilitating the increase of activity. And then on the second point, what was the second point I wanted to make? What was the second part of your question? I'm so sorry, Councillor Marsh.
Just maybe it was regarding if we scale up even higher than what is anticipated. I'm not sure if that's.
So at this point, Councillor Marsh, we have this envelope of funds available, and we'll kind of just be able to work within that envelope to support the increased desire. But I think we'll see kind of coming into 2022 if that is a sufficient envelope or if the demand outweighs the availability of resources.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. There are no further questions on this item. Can I get a mover? Moved by Mayor Vrbanovic. Any comments? I'm not seeing any. Those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Very good. The next item, and this is the item that actually doesn't have any staff presentation. It is the Artist in Residence partnership with Textile Magazine. I don't believe there's any presentation in my notes, Ms. Varon, but okay, very good. Any questions on this item? I'm not seeing any questions. Could I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Galloway-Sealock. Any comments? I'm not seeing any. I'll comment only that, always happy to see new artists and residents coming in, and I see that staff's taking a bit of a different take on this, and I like when we mix things up a little bit. So, Councillor Marsh, comment?
Oh yeah, I couldn't help but just add that this is so exciting, and I look forward to getting the link to the Bond Park podcasts. And I don't know what celebration we will see ahead with the pandemic, restrictions, but let's hope that we can see something that we can celebrate 25 years of an Artist in Residence program here at the City of Kitchener. What an exciting milestone! It's too bad it got passed last year. But thank you so much for all the work that you do, Caroline and Emily and others to make this possible. And the Textile Magazine partnership, I think is also exciting. And let's just see what we can, what we can see move forward in terms of broadening our reach and seeing what new and emerging artists we can bring to the forefront and highlight. So thank you.
Okay, very good.
Through the chair, sorry, I just wanted to say thank you very much for those words of encouragement, and we'll keep you updated. We're excited about another possible partnership, but that would help us celebrate the 25th. So yeah, we'll keep you updated, but thank you so much for those kind words.
Very good. Appreciate the work. Okay, it's been moved. Those in favor? And that's carried unanimously as well. And the final item is the My Main Street Accelerator Program. There is a presentation for this item. Mr. Bloom, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually just going to introduce the presenter. I'm just waiting to see Mr. Escriba is on. So first of all, I want to introduce everyone to Mr. Escriba. He's our current economic development analyst. You may have known him. He formerly worked with Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, and he's been with our organization for the past number of months and is doing an amazing job. Just as quick context, as you're all well aware, since the start of the pandemic, we've been in constant dialogue with our business community, particularly Main Street businesses, restaurants, retailers, service providers, and to hear the challenges that they face. And one of the common comments is their need for more wraparound direct supports from those that can help them build their business back. And one of the key asks being how can we as the city potentially help them with marketing. So we were actually already beginning to devise a program, and the federal government has since launched a program that we think is a perfect fit for what we've been hearing. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mr. Escriba, who's going to run you through the proposed program.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom, for the intro. Good morning, Chair Davey, and good morning to the committee. It's great to be here today, and I'm excited to walk you through the My Main Street program. So I do have PowerPoint slides to go with it. Awesome, thank you. So the city has successfully applied for funding through the My Main Street Accelerator program, which is a major economic initiative focused on revitalizing the business landscape in Main Street areas across the country. The city of Kitchener successfully applied for 4 ambassadors, which was the program maximum. Before we get into this specific program, I did want to highlight that currently we do have the Love My Business program going through, which was a Make It Kitchener 2.0 initiative. And that program is specifically dedicated to providing marketing supports to suburban businesses, while this particular program is providing similar direct supports to urban businesses more within the core. So if we can please move on to the next slide. So on this slide here, you're going to see 4 geographic areas that the city was tasked with selecting for 4 separate ambassadors. So the areas we've selected capture most of our community's urban main streets with collective access to over 1,500 businesses, 600 plus of which are Main Street businesses. So the 4 areas we've decided to focus on are the Market District and King Street East, Downtown Kitchener, Belmont Village, and Victoria Street North and Lancaster Street West. Move on to the next slide, please. Each ambassador of the 4 ambassadors, each will focus on 4 key areas. The main goal or objective for each ambassador will be to provide wraparound support for 100 to 200 businesses throughout their year contract. So within that, one of the major aspects of what they'll be doing is attracting new businesses to fill vacancies in some of those Main Street areas where we've seen vacancies come throughout the COVID pandemic and even before then. One of the major components of what they'll be doing is around data. And my particular role, data, is very huge. And so I'm quite excited about this. These ambassadors will be supporting businesses with market research, which will involve secondary market research to understand the community's trade area, its demographics, how residents spend their money, their mobility, and how they consume media. So it's also going to provide primary research that surveys the local community to understand what types of products and services they're looking for and where some sort of gaps might be within the local community. The final kind of objective for the ambassadors is to work with those new and existing businesses in these areas to help launch new marketing campaigns to not only broaden their customer base, but also to re-engage existing customers and enhancing their physical stores and restaurants as well. Move on to the next slide, please. From the financial standpoint, this is a very, very high-level overview of what the finances look like. In total, there's $750,000 in total funding, which will be broken down into 3 pieces as you see in front of you. $230,000 is the federal contribution of funding, and that will go towards program costs, which include salary, as well as incidental costs such as software and tech equipment needed for each ambassador. $400,000 in funding will be available in $10,000 increments for local businesses. So local businesses will actually have an opportunity to apply for $10,000 grants that will be provided through the program. And to clarify, the city will not be distributing these grants. This will be someone from the My Main Street program. But local businesses that work with the ambassadors will be receiving detailed info on how they can go about applying for these grants in specific. The city's contribution is expected to be up to $80,000, which will be used to cover the remaining salary costs for the ambassadors and additional $40,000 available in kind. This amount that you see in front of you will be funded through the Make It Kitchener 2.0 reserve. So looking at the big picture here, the city is getting a 6-to-1 funding ratio, which is a great return on investment that will be invaluable to the future success of businesses in the city of Kitchener. Please move on to the next slide. With all that being said, you have in front of you in the staff report, you'll see the recommendation we've put forward for your review. Our recommendation is we move forward in signing the funding agreement and getting to work on the Main Street areas that we have identified. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. There are several questions. Unfortunately, I did not see them as they came in, so I'm going to go in the order. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Chair Davey, and welcome to the team. Good to meet you. And I guess this sounds like a really good program. I'm just wondering who's going to be in charge of hiring the ambassadors?
So this particular program, with hiring goes to the city of Kitchener, but I will allow Mr. Bloom to answer the question with further detail.
So through the chair, Councillor Ioannidis, the city will, we have full purview on the hiring process.
Okay. And are we going to be looking at individuals in particular that have some form of experience with this, or are we just gonna like look at for, let's say, students or something? I don't know. What's the recommendation for the hiring requirements?
So through the chair, the salary that these positions will be paid at will be competitive and allow us to seek senior level candidates with experience. This will not be a co-op role. Much like the Love My Business program, we hope we'll find somebody with both technical skills and experience running a business.
Okay, so part of their role of these ambassadors is to help attract and fill vacancies. So is part of that mandate going to help maybe enhance the type of services that are involved in these Market Street areas, and in particular the four, other than, let's say, restaurants and stuff like that? Are they going to be able to emphasize more diversified types of vacancies?
So through the chair, yeah, so that is certainly one of the expectations of the program in general all across the province, is not simply filling vacancies for the sake of filling vacancies, but understanding what each area needs and trying to facilitate relationships that allow landlords to find tenants that match the local needs.
Okay, so would these ambassadors basically build like would they be responsible for forming, let's say, a business plan and a business attraction plan for the area, so that we don't have to have our staff do it in particular?
Through the chair, yes, that's one of the expectations. They are, and again, primarily driven by data and analysis of perhaps neighborhood gaps, and then building out a plan of how they're going to attract new tenants.
Okay, well, thank you for all those questions. And Mr. Chair, when the time's appropriate, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Davey. And Vedran, great to see you again and be working with you in another capacity. So welcome to the team again. Yeah, I did have a couple of questions. One of them was around the business grant funding, which is $10,000 to 40 businesses. Now, is that $400,000? Is that strictly for Kitchener, or is that part of this Ontario-wide piece?
Through the chair, that will be a contribution solely for the city of Kitchener. So 40 local businesses from the city of Kitchener will have access to a $10,000 non-repayable contribution.
Wow, that's really exciting. So I'm assuming then that with part of okay, so the data and market research, I assume, is going to be coming from you and your team, or is that data going to be something that these new people will be gathering and giving out to the businesses?
Through the chair, the program, the My Main Street program, is actually partnering with Environics Analytics and a few other leading market research firms who will provide both primary and secondary research and data analytics to help guide the My Main Street ambassadors as they kind of work with businesses. So we're actually getting access to data that is very expensive and that businesses typically wouldn't be able to afford. So this data will be invaluable, not just for the businesses, but for the city as well.
This is so exciting, because you're right, to be able to get this data and to be able to help small businesses make evidence-based decisions on kind of how they should be spending their marketing dollars is really exciting. So I am thrilled about this as well, and I'm also thrilled that Belmont Village was chosen as one of these streets too. So I'll just put a little plug in there. So thank you. That's really terrific. Yeah. So will the people who will be working on this project, the new team that's coming in, are they going to determine then who is going to get this money, this $400,000, or is that something that our active group will be, or maybe it's going to come to council? I don't know. I don't suspect that it would, but who will be determining that?
Through the chair, my understanding is the dedicated My Main Street ambassadors will identify potential entrepreneurs and businesses based on community market research, which will help identify some of the gaps and potential in those neighborhoods. So they will kind of guide businesses to apply as needed. I'm not sure if Mr. Bloom has anything to add to that as well.
Just through the chair, that really the ambassador's role is to get as many businesses to try to apply. The My Main Street program will actually makes the decision. So if there are more applicants than funding, that falls to My Main Street, not to staff or council.
Okay, I think that's really great, because that takes it into a third party, which is actually really good. But as you said, though, the 400,000 is specifically for Kitchener, but is decided at a higher level, if I'm correct in that. Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm very excited about this program, and thank you so much to our active team for being proactive about applying for and seeking out this funding for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the capability of the people we're hiring. They're going to get us $50,000 salary. Do they get fringe benefits on top of that? And if so, who pays for that?
So through the chair, they will receive the benefits that are as standard per one-year contract with the City of Kitchener, and those have all been factored into the costs of the overall cost of the program per ambassador.
So those costs are not in the 50,000; they're in the other 20,000.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I really we're hiring here consultants, as I see, and I really question what kind of knowledgeable people you get for $50,000 a year. These are people that are going to be advising businesses and people that are going to have business background. Are there a lot of people out there like that at $50,000 a year?
Through the chair, Councillor Gazzola, the $80,000 that the City of Kitchener is contributing will actually go towards additional salary costs. So although $50,000 is being contributed by the federal government for the salary, additional approximately $20,000 will be added to their salaries. And to add to your earlier question, these ambassadors will actually have access to training as well. So they'll have access to what they call the Main Street Ambassadors Network for professional guidance, resources, peer-to-peer sharing of some of the best practices that they've used in the past and success stories to kind of help further train them as they begin their journey. Mr. Bloom, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you answered that. Councillor Gazzola, I can't answer your question until we see the candidate pool, but we're optimistic that we'll find four highly qualified staff people, four highly qualified candidates who can carry out this work.
Okay, you're looking at $70,000 a year people in this day and economy. I really question that. My biggest concerns with this whole program is that why doesn't this apply right across the city? Why do we have four specific areas? And on top of that, who decided the four specific areas?
So through the chair, so it was really the program itself. They set out criteria, and we asked them similar questions to what you had asked, and their feedback to us was it's predominantly meant to focus on urban Main Street businesses, and that we would be more successful if we focused on urban areas as opposed to suburban areas. And the ones that we've proposed capture almost the entirety of our urban business areas. So really, it was based on the direction we were given from the My Main Street program.
I'm curious as to why Fairway Road was not included in this group.
Through the chair, again, I think the primary focus from the program is to support predominantly independent businesses that don't have access, that aren't part of national corporations or chains, and we were encouraged to focus on urban areas where it's predominantly independent businesses, and the ones that we put forward were the ones that obviously have the greatest concentration of those types of businesses.
Well, Fairway Road is an urban area in our community, and I'm disappointed because Fairway Road has contributed tremendously to the tax collections of this community for the past 30, 40 years. And there are a lot of Main Street businesses there that don't get included in this program. So I'm quite frankly, I'm really disappointed in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Benovich.
Thanks a lot, and thanks Corey and Vedran for the presentation and the work that's been done on this. I certainly am, quite excited to see this moving forward. I do understand where Councillor Gazzola is coming from, but I think that's, I think we need to sort of look at the context. Is much of this was really developed with the influence of cities like Toronto that have many BIAs throughout their community. We've only got a couple, and so the fact that we were in fact able to take it beyond our two BIAs and to other areas where we're seeing a fair number of independent, not owned by large corporation businesses, is a piece of good news. I will support the motion as Councillor Ioannidis has moved, and I do want to acknowledge the work that I know has been done by Toronto and others collectively, our advocacy to get a program like this in place. As these programs are developed, they always don't tick all of the boxes that maybe we hope for, but between things that the feds do and the province does and what we do, hopefully we can support the vast majority of small businesses in our community, both independent and corporately owned.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So just, I want a clarification on who are we directing this program at? Landlords, existing businesses, or new businesses? Or all of the above?
Through the chair, this program will be dedicated towards new and existing businesses within those four geographic areas that we've identified. I'm not sure if Mr. Bloom has anything else to add to that.
Through the chair, yes, as Mr. Escriva said, that is the primary focus. Certainly of the wraparound services. There may be interactions with landlords, especially if there's a potential new business and a need to connect them. and maybe as a side comment, what I think also addresses Councillor Gazzola's comment is once we have these ambassadors in place, I think the access to data, we can take advantage of that citywide. And if there are businesses in suburban areas that are looking for supports, if we can take advantage of the ambassadors while we have them to provide services, we certainly will endeavor to do that as best we can.
My other question had to do with the $10,000 per business. Is that flexible? Like, if you had more applications than say the 10 in any one given area, could you distribute the money differently to benefit more businesses?
So through the chair, unfortunately, that's not a decision we get to make. That is how the My Main Street program administrators decide to divvy out the funding. We really don't have a say in. My hope is that if, for example, if people are applying for $5,000 grants, that they'll hand out more than just 10. What we do know is that each of the 4 areas has been dedicated $100,000 worth of grant funding.
Okay, and my final question is, Councillor Gazzola mentioned, some areas being left out. I worry that we create haves and have-nots in this program, and even within the established areas that we're talking about, the downtown area, the Belmont and the Victoria Street area. How are we going to deal with pushback from already existing businesses that are saying, hey, well, what about me? Like, how is that going to be addressed?
Yeah, so through the chair, I think in 2 ways. So number one, we have the Love My Business program coordinator, who, especially if it's in a suburban area, that could be the very first point of contact, and that Ms. Dolson would work directly with them. Certainly, as I said, if there's capacity for these ambassadors to help people beyond the geographic limits that the program required us to identify, we will certainly do that. I think the only limitation is the grant funding is only available to those within the 4 geographic areas. But certainly, if we can, I think I share your desire that if there's a business out there that needs our help, we will do everything we can with the resources we've got to help them.
And I guess I have one last question. How do we ensure that we're not supporting already very well established businesses?
So through the chair, that is one of the training components that the ambassadors will get from the My Main Street program is some direction on which businesses they want to see supported the most. So for example, we do know that one of their mandates will be, or one of the goals is that at least half of the grant recipients be from entrepreneurs from equity deserving groups, whether that's female led or led by entrepreneurs of color, for example. So we do know that there is goals that the program has set to make sure that those that don't need the support aren't necessarily the focus of the program.
So I just want to say I will be supporting this, but I do worry about those, the creation of the haves and the have-nots, and how this is going to look at the end of the day. So I hope staff keeps a close eye on things as it develops.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis.
Sorry, I'm just for comments.
Oh, comments? Okay, so second round then, Councillor Gazzola.
No, I just have a comment to make.
Okay, very good. I do not have any questions, so we'll go right into comments. Councillor Ioannidis, you moved the motion. Do you want to speak first or last?
I'll go ahead. So we got to remember, one of the things that we have to focus in is this is not a document and a program that was developed by our staff. I mean, they assisted in this, but this is a program that was developed by the federal and provincial levels. And sometimes we got to take what we can get. Am I disappointed with regards to not being the whole city? Of course, I'm disappointed. I would like to see this throughout the city, but we got to take what is given to us. And I think staff have done a fabulous job with looking after this. And, we're looking at areas that are typically somewhat under, heavily focused with with businesses that are independent and they're not like Chick-fil-A or Canadian Tire or McDonald's and all that stuff that's on Fairway Road. Like it's quite the difference. And you know, I could say the same thing for the Boardwalk area where I represent. It's all major chains. They have a lot of their own backing. So I mean, independent business to me is something that's needs our support more than ever. And this program is basically going to give us 4 business managers for these areas where they're going to do a ton of work at a fraction of the cost. To me, it's an extraordinary opportunity for us, and I fully hope that we all agree to this and, you know, get this unanimous and support this. Even though it's not perfect, it's what we got.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm torn as to whether I should support this, but I realize that I can't be parochial here. This is a good thing for the city, even though it doesn't include the whole city. We do a lot of talking around this horseshoe, and one of the words we use all the time is inclusivity. You know, equity, inclusivity, all of these words, they're just words because here we're not being inclusive. I'm disappointed. Yes, there are a lot of chains in that on Fairway Road, but there are a lot of independent businesses. And even when companies are involved with chains, it's usually some individual, a local individual who has a franchise operation and who could use $10,000 as much as the person down in Belmont Village or some other one of these other 4 areas. So I was pleased to hear that perhaps we might supplement this program with some of the $5 million that we have set aside locally. So I wonder if you could I keep that in mind as we move forward, that if there are a lot of good requests out there that are not being met by the federal ambassador program, that we could look to putting some of our $5 million to work. So I will reluctantly vote in favor of this, although I want to be noted as being upset with the way it's been put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I'm happy to support this. There are elements of it that are fantastic, like providing the analytics and the guidance for the businesses. The business owners are super busy these days. They've spent a lot of time just being at their business and running their business. They don't have the time to do the analytics or do a lot of the research. And I think this ambassador program is really going to really help them out and guide them and do a lot of the footwork for them. So thanks for this. It's going to be great for those that can take advantage of it. And I do agree, it would be great to expand it further at some point when the funding is available.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud.
Yeah, I'm echoing what Councillor Ioannidis and Councillor Schneider and actually Councillor Gazzola as well. You know, as a councillor in a suburban area, a little disappointed it's not trickling over, but I totally understand the choices that were made, and I think that the choices that the areas that you're supporting are great little niches in the city that I'll use Belmont as an example. I've always said I would like a Belmont village in every ward, and if this is just a start and we can have a template to go forward, that we can create little places like this and use funds to do that, then this is a wonderful initiative. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be supporting as well. This is, first of all, congrats to staff to jumping on applying to this program and being successful in that, and getting the maximum number of ambassadors that we could according to the program. Is it perfect? No. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to be targeted, and the tools that the federal government applies are always going to be imprecise depending on the community that they're applying it to. There's never a one size fits all sort of a solution. And the alternative to that is to broaden it to the point that any funds that come forward are so small because it's so spread apart, it's diluted to the point that it's really inconsequential. So again, is it perfect? No, but it's a tremendous opportunity for the city of Kitchener to help several small businesses and several well, I guess 4 key areas where they have been identified as being less supported by larger corporations. So I'm happy to support this. And this is something that the only thing I'm worried about is when the ambassadors start going door to door, some of these small businesses might, be overly suspicious that, we're trying to help them to such a degree without having any money come back. But I leave it to economic development staff and the ambassadors to crack that nut. It's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That concludes Finance and Corporate Services Committee. We do have special counsel coming up in about 45 minutes at 1 p.m. and we'll see you then.